Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
Here we are again. Is it not summer or what? I'm feeling incredibly hot today.
Very, very warm. Anyone coming over from New Zealand, beware, it is very warm suddenly in Japan.
Yeah, summer's here and it's humid. It's not.
Those days of the morning when I wake up, I usually have the window right open, but not happening now. Not happening. Keeping it closed and aircon is on.
Oh my goodness. Wow. We're still a bit cooler up here in Fukushima. So as I say all the time, you want to escape the Tokyo heat, come to Iwaki, Fukushima. It's not so bad here. I want to ask you one of those questions that puts you on the spot, but you have to think of something and then you say the answer and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was the answer, but that's, I want to say one of those kind of really...
Is this to me, Jane? You want to
provoking kind of, not provoking kind of questions, like and then you have to ask me, but it would be like something like, if tomorrow you were getting on a plane and you were going to start a new life or business in Japan with your knowledge of what we've learned over the last year and a half, what would you do?
I think it was Rebecca's episode that made me think a lot about this. I love the idea of that boutique hotel and making it about the neighborhood. That's what Hotel Indigo are doing and bringing in the neighborhood. And I thought, what would that look like if I did a hotel and I made it about opportunities or experiences or something that was a little bit different to say neighborhood, but a special kind of hotel where people could come and stay and really, really enjoy a real part of Japan that I now know about. So I don't know what it is, but I feel like the experience part in that hotel that's doing something different, little touches in the room, ways that you can make people feel more memorable for them, right? That's more memorable for them and they're coming to Japan. So I've got that coming up for me since we had that exciting episode with Rebecca. I feel the omotenashi, it ties me back to those roots of being a tour guide in New Zealand. And how could I do that in Japan as a place that people would come and stay? And it's very different to what's out there right now.
Yeah,
so maybe it's a converted
you just
building.
show up, and there's all these opportunities to experience different things, whatever you want to. Kind of like a summer camp.
Yeah, summer camp.
Like Heidi High. Heidi High campers.
I love that. That's the kind of thing I'd love to be able to do if it was me coming back here again fresh, but knowing all the knowledge that I've got.
Right. You just, you're starting fresh. Like you don't have your boutique law firm, or whatever. It's just, I'm just going to go and do something in Japan. That was just the thing I was just wondering. Yeah.
Here we go. Reverse for you. You've decided that you're going to go back to New Zealand. What are you going to do with and for New Zealand based on this experience you've had in Japan so far, having children here, bringing a family up, going through a disaster, having a lovely time on the podcast, doing all these things between New Zealand and Japan? What would you take back and want to do as your first thing back in your home country?
Ooh, now that is a difficult question. What would I do for New Zealand with my experience of having lived in Japan for 20 years and all of the things that I now know back in New Zealand? I think, if it's going to be something that serves New Zealand, then the answer might be different. But what's coming to me is that to exponentially help the relationship between Japan and New Zealand, then it would be bringing young Japanese people to New Zealand and showing them a different way of life, and not a homestay as such, but helping them get amazing opportunities in New Zealand, whether it's interning at this company or staying with this particular host family where they own a farm, right? And then you're out on the farm and you're feeding the animals, whatever. Connecting young Japanese people with amazing life-changing experiences in New Zealand that they can then go back to Japan and create something with, right? They're not necessarily going to become a salary man or a stressed out hardworking salary woman or with 2 kids in daycare and all of these things. Like they're going to do something different from what's happened from the experience. So that was what was coming to me just then, that I could manage those situations and help them and see, okay, you're finding it difficult today. I can understand why that's happening for you. And take a deep breath or whatever. Tomorrow will be another day. But
Mm.
I just meet so many Japanese people who are doing amazing things in Japan because of the experience that they've had overseas, and particularly in New Zealand. And they tell me about the
Yeah.
wonderful time that they had in New Zealand, and even just doing something simple like, helping out in a cafe and learning how to chat to people.
Well, actually, yes. Isn't that
Yes,
amazing?
right.
Yeah.
Learning how to just chat to
Yeah.
people
How to
and
chat.
see how they're going, and
Yeah.
just learning, that skill that they
Yeah.
don't learn in Japan, because that's not,
That's right.
no,
You don't learn it in Japan. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't have a icebreaker or chit chat before you get into the start of a meeting. You never do that, right? But in New Zealand, we absolutely do it. So some of that could be quite useful back in Japan. It could
Oh,
be
well,
a really good,
create something that we
create
don't
something
even
different.
know we need yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. I love that idea. And I love that it's also not just one and done, that you go to New Zealand, thanks very much, check, done that. It's an experience that lives in your heart and your mind, and you want to do something with it. You're impacted so much by what you did, experienced in New Zealand, that you want to bring it back, and you're activated, motivated to do something different here, right? That would be awesome. Wow, look at that. 2 great ideas on the spur of the moment that we didn't know each other was going to ask. And there we go.
yeah. Who knows
Who
what will
wants to
happen?
back these ideas? Anyone out there listening? Come on, we want to do this.
Yeah. Who wants to finance the hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have seen Japan in the news that's not news in Japan, right?
I love that, right?
I
The
think we
news
have
that's
to
not
call
news.
this out, because I think the rest of the world sort of seems to be looking at this and going, oh, look at this. But it's not actually news here in Japan. What are we seeing in the news about Japan?
Well, I think it started with the G7, didn't it? I mean, there was the whole G7 in Japan hosting, but it's just the recent activity
This is sort of
of
post the main G7. It's
the G7
another
just keeps on
meeting.
giving, right? The gift that
Yeah.
keeps on giving. And there's several other meetings that were held before the actual G7 in Hiroshima, and then this recent meeting. And it was a meeting of, what were their exact titles?
The G7 ministerial meeting on gender equality and women's empowerment is the big board that everybody's standing in front of. In this picture that we've seen being made into memes and all sorts of things around on social media. So Japan sent its minister for gender equality.
I mean, it was a ministerial meeting, after all.
Yes, yes.
So they read the memo that it was a ministerial meeting.
Yeah.
So the minister is a male, right? Is it Mr. Ogura?
Yeah.
Is that his
Ogura-san,
name?
yes.
Ogura-san, right?
Ogura Daijin is the Minister for Equality in Japan. So he was at the meeting.
So what's
And
captured the
it's-
world attention is that he's the one standing there with 3 women on one side and 3 women on the other side of him in the middle of the photograph, right? He's in the middle, benched by a group of women. And people are saying, where's your female representative in this gender equality meeting? Japan, where is your woman? Which is an interesting thing for the world to think, because in Japan it's kind of normal.
Well,
we
yeah,
had some good thoughts about this, didn't we, Jane? Because I think, it's very easy to shove a photo out there and
the
blast
optics
Japan.
are not great, let's say. Okay, the optics of this photo.
But we had a couple of good things to bring out about this. And the first one was what we've just talked about, is that it was a ministerial meeting, and Japan did send its minister, and convened it in Japan as the minister, and it happened to be a male so far, right? So he did actually get the memo on that. I think there are a couple of other countries, at least one, didn't send a minister, provided their ambassador,
Instead,
which is not a minister. So I think Japan respected the memo, bringing the top person, right? They're bringing the government minister to this meeting. That's number one.
Yeah, and Ogura Daijin, or Ogura-san, I'm going to call him Ogura-san. It seems like he is an ally, right? So he is there to learn, and I think he probably got a great education from the people he spent his time with. Hopefully he did a lot of listening and hearing about opportunities and things that could be done in Japan. So hopefully very soon it will be a day in Japan where we can have a woman minister of equality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you've got the second point there, right? He was an ally, is an ally. And we do hope that, like most things, if you don't see it or hear it from somebody, you never know what it's going to be or what it should be. And so with the 6 teachers around him from the other countries, he must have learned a lot in these last few days.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah. So
yeah,
we will
feel it.
look
Come on, Japan,
forward
you
to
saw it.
seeing the drip down to our daily lives here in Japan. Yeah, optics not great. Oguro-san, I think he's God, that must be a difficult job though, right?
Imagine
to be
how
the
he's
equality
feeling.
minister. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the one who was walking around with the pregnancy suit on as well, wasn't he? He was in the media a while ago because he and some of his fellow people had on their pregnancy suits, I'm going to call it that, with the big heavy stomach, and experiencing what it's like to be a pregnant woman for a whole day, or hopefully it was at least a week that he was made to wear that.
Yeah.
And I also hope he was given nausea drugs as well, so that he got the full experience, and also something to make him want to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes, just to really bring it home to what it's actually like to do that. But it sounds like he's been a good sport about it all and giving it a go and showing up and doing things. So who knows? But yeah, this
so
is
we just
how
wanted
it's being
to set
done.
some points out there that, Japan, yes, we know she's not doing too well, and now she's at 125 in the gender equality list. It's dropped down again. So, we've got to really help Japan get a little bit further, and we're trying to do that in various ways, being active females within this community in Japan, and just, helping Japan to think about things differently. And we can all do that in our own ways every single day. We can't just rely on the government to make changes or show up and do different things. We also have to do it ourselves, I believe.
Yeah, it's got to happen in business and education, all the things. So yeah, no need to stand around with your hands in your pockets.
Do it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A great example of something that's not news in Japan, but the rest of the world might be finding that it is news. We're kind of more worried about the Kabuki family news here in Japan at the moment, which is, yeah, go Google that.
It's news, isn't it? It's coming up first on the rank.
It's huge news. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And if you haven't heard that, you'll have to go and find out what that is.
Yeah, go Google.
Go into it today, but it's big news in Japan, actually. So this episode, Jane, is a little different.
It's the Catherine and Jane show this week. We have some things that we really want to talk about. So it's you and me today. Stay tuned in, people. Don't go away.
Don't go away. Stay there, stay there. First up was, we did have one person who spoke to us a little while ago, and he came to Japan during the Beppu conference for the JNZBC. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about him and some comments that he made and share those with everybody. We also want to talk about the JNZBC itself. And that meeting is fast coming up on the schedule for this year. We wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. So JNZBC is the Japan New Zealand Business Council, and they run a conference every year, and they alternate between Japan and New Zealand. So last year was in Beppu in November, and this coming year in November, 2021, November, it will be held in Christchurch. And it's really great to see the JNZBC have already put out a draft agenda, and they're already padding out all of the plenary sessions, which is really cool. I can see they've got the theme of the conference is intergenerational action. Ooh,
excellent.
Pretty big. That is really big. Thank you. That is great to see. And then the plenary sessions are around forestry, fisheries, energy, decarbonisation, etc., tourism and science. So all very, very good topics that Japan and New Zealand have plenty of opportunities to be collaborating on and are already collaborating on.
And we see one of our Jandals guests has been chosen to be a speaker on tourism. So Mike Harris will be speaking. That's going to be a good time, definitely. Very entertaining, I'm sure, as well as informative. So if you're wondering who Mike Harris is, go and find that episode a few episodes back and hear about the work that he does with the tourism industry in Japan.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the CRO, isn't he? Chief Refreshing Officer, and that makes me laugh every time.
Yeah.
Of canyons, and has a great story to tell. And he told a lot of it on the podcast with us, and it was so entertaining and very insightful. So yeah, when he grabs the stage in Christchurch in November, it's actually Tuesday, 21st of November, he's in the 5th plenary session, be livening things up. I can't wait to hear that. And we're really just so thankful, I think, to the JCCI, the Japan Chamber of Commerce, who run the Japan side of the committee, who've communicated with New Zealand side, and they've, thought about this a lot, how to bring some different people into the conference, get some more interest through younger people, get some more interest as well through women. And a way of doing that is to focus on adventure tourism, which is exactly why Mike is there.
Yeah,
women make up a big part of the tourism industry, both in Japan and New Zealand.
Yeah, I think adventure tourism is something that Japan has so much potential, and New Zealand has so much expertise. So it's just a really great place for them to start to collaborate more, I feel, to bring some of those, especially some of the safety aspects that we heard about from Mike. Imagine bringing some of those over here and making the industry much safer for everyone, so we can all enjoy it more. And
when we spoke with Alex Holmes, he said to us that Japan is the 5th largest tourism market for New Zealand. So Japanese tourists going into New Zealand are at level 5, right? Out of all the countries in the world. It perhaps may not have been growing pre-COVID. I certainly know in my previous days when I was a tour guide, it was just massive. There were people coming through all the time. And I guess COVID has hurt things a little bit, but still number 5. And I think there's heaps of potential there for New Zealand to find ways of alluring more Japanese to travel to New Zealand and bring that from 5 up to, top 3.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing and hearing a lot of people in Japan who don't want to travel anymore. They've been so terrified by what went on during COVID that they've lost any interest in traveling. So getting Japanese people to travel again, we really have to appeal to the safety aspect of traveling to New Zealand.
Absolutely.
That it is a safe destination. You can have a nice holiday, and hopefully the yen will come back and Japanese people will be able to afford to travel again, because that's another thing that I'm hearing is that international students are just can't afford to go to New Zealand anymore. And so how are we going to overcome these kinds of challenges to make New Zealand attractive again to international students, young people? Because if young people don't leave Japan and get those outside experiences, then we have the problem that they probably never leave Japan, right? That they're becoming sort of more, it's too scary out there in the big bad world, which is what they've learned over the last 3 years. I've certainly felt that I don't want to travel, and I'm a New Zealander.
Right. The thought of traveling it's quite a big mind block to get over. So if we're having that, perhaps it's harder even for Japanese who've been here and been very comfortable during COVID. We were well looked after. There were restrictions on us, but nothing like overseas. So yes, I've heard the same with people not wanting to go overseas, and then they're worried if something does happen, how will I be looked after in that country that I'm visiting? I don't
speak English well enough to deal with whatever happens, or maybe there's another virus pops up and the world shuts down again while I'm overseas, or my child is overseas. It's still very raw, I think, for a lot of people.
But if they do travel, one of Alex's comments as well was that he thought that visitors have values that aligned to New Zealand. So he thought his comment was about Japanese people having values aligned to those of New Zealand. And so those are the kinds of people who would travel to New Zealand, was one of his thoughts. So he also saw that there was probably a real untapped potential there of leveraging that, even that small aspect of values that are connected.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one, I think, for especially Japanese travelers, is the kind of travelers we want to have come to New Zealand, who appreciate the beauty of our nature and take care of it, which is generally, what Japanese people tend to do generally. So those are the kind of people we want to have more of, coming and enjoying our nature and coming back to Japan, telling everybody about it. Some of the Japanese people I've met here who are fans of New Zealand are just next level New Zealand fans. And I'm sure you've met these people too, Catherine. They just love New Zealand, and any chance to talk about New Zealand and how great it is to people, anyone who'll listen to them. Yeah, so they're really a great resource for building our brand even more. It's not necessarily sending New Zealanders out into the world. It's giving Japanese people an amazing experience when they visit New Zealand.
Definitely. And I think that helps too. To another point that Alex brought up was the breaking down of barriers between nations. It's really only when you go and visit a country and spend time there, especially speaking with people, even if it's in pidgin English or pidgin Japanese, you get to know them so much better on the ground when you visit. And I think that was one of Alex's great comments, was to call on that as a way to break barriers. Come to New Zealand and do that. Go to Japan as well. But I feel when he was here, he saw that that was a potential. And I think also for him attending the conference, what he said was being there and being able to speak with people who were involved in tourism, or just generally speaking Japanese that he could speak to and ask them questions about New Zealand. That was also a way of breaking down barriers, meeting together face to face. So those were really insightful comments that we had from Alex there.
Yeah, so thinking along the lines of tourism again, how can we break down barriers through tourism? Because loading people onto a tour bus and sending them around doesn't necessarily do that. But those amazing experiences that both the Japanese government and I think New Zealand too are creating, these experience-based experience-based experiences. What is that? So, for example, we're seeing the increase of the Budo tourism, the martial arts tourism, right? So helping people to connect with a dojo where they can practice and make friends with the members. Like, that is life-changing kind of experience.
Yeah, and you could gloss over that quite easily. Go, oh yeah, so what? It's just visiting a dojo. So what? But it's more than that, isn't it? Much more. It's so much deeper.
So deep. And once you've got that connection, and if you maintain it, like it wouldn't matter if you didn't see each other for 2 or 3 years, but if you went back again, and it would be, an amazing experience for them and for you. And so, also in New Zealand, what does that look like? Maybe we've got sort of like farm stays, or these short-term things where you can go and do a working holiday and work somewhere and meet people, get to know them. That just changes people's perspective so much.
Does.
So
the Asia New Zealand Foundation brought out a report. It's pre-COVID, but it does talk about how there was a group, for example, of female students, 20 of them from Japan visited New Zealand on an agricultural exchange experience, where they visited Southland and they went to dairy farms and saw dairy farms in action. They went to one of the Fonterra factories and learning all about New Zealand farming methods. So there's potential there for doing that kind of agri-tourism, more of that, and adventures, as you just said, through the experience of doing stuff, not just looking out a window at on the left, on the right scenery, and actually getting into it and experiencing New Zealand.
Yeah, we're seeing like young people who are coming of age in Japan are people who have had far more English experience and are far more open to having these kind of more in-person experiences than Japanese have ever been in the past. So it's looking bright in that area. I feel like kids are learning English in the 3rd grade now. My son has just started his English education at the age of 8 here in Japan. So it's really making a difference, and I'm seeing a huge difference in kids, the way they approach me, for example, in this area. They're not scared of me, whereas before it was like, oh, scary foreigner over there. And 10 years ago in the same neighborhood, now it's just like, oh, hi, hello.
It's interesting though how many people here too have had an experience of New Zealand, as you were mentioning before, and they want to continue their English, and they want to continue some connection to New Zealand. And I've mentioned to a couple of them who are not listeners of this podcast, but if you're really natsukashi, you're really aching for a New Zealand accent, come along and listen to us and you'll hear us talking like this. And so there's a few who've been super excited to do that and just grab the podcast and listen to some New Zealand English. And aside from that, I also think this podcast, on reflection, how many episodes now, Jane? More than 30, 33, I think.
34, I think this one is.
It's really been an opportunity for us to have people come along and freely share their experiences, tell us so many things that are really great resources for others to grab onto. And they're doing that of their time. They're just giving their time to come on and show what they've done, how they've got over challenges, how they continue to do that. So I think it's really fun for us that we've been able to work with these influential individuals, many of them, and amazing companies, and just shine this light on what is being done. But also there's just so much more potential that hasn't happened yet. And if you look to it, the ability to really connect between countries, I think about what's been one of the most amazing things for us this year is to have that impact through the fundraiser that we helped on for bringing funds, 3 million yen, 36,000 New Zealand dollars from the Japanese and New Zealand community here through 1-2 events that went through to flood recovery for after Cyclone Gabrielle. So just the things that we can do together is actually not as hard as we think. It takes a bit of effort, but you can do it and have really good impact in many, many ways that you never thought could be possible. And I think that's all stemmed from our association with the podcast and the people that we've met through it who've built up a community and want to keep going and doing more and more and more between the two countries. Yeah.
A lot of people have asked us that, like, where is the New Zealand community and where can I find it? And I was like, well,
start here.
It's kind of over there and over there, but this one is available to you too. So welcome.
There's so many opportunities though. I grabbed some more comments from the Asian New Zealand Foundation, and these are the things they listed: addressing climate change together, becoming energy partners for low carbon future, building renewable energy supply chains through geothermal and hydrogen, right? Increasing our security and cyber partnerships, developing advanced technologies. And I'm going to add in here this sort of idea of New Zealand startups collaborating with Japanese larger businesses to do things together. And then there's more things that they said were around the trade agenda, global trade agenda, and also being partners in this Pacific area to support each other. They're all just like substantive ways that have so much more potential, I think, for New Zealand and Japan. Seize it, go seize it. And I think our ideas too, we want to do a whole lot more in this space and especially deepen the community as Team New Zealand in Japan. We like to use this hashtag Team NZ in Japan, with more information, education and collaboration at our forefront, especially building a pipeline of professional opportunities for many people. But I think especially close to our heart are the wahine, our women who we want to see building leadership within Japan in the future. And we really think pulling on the strengths that New Zealand and Japan has, maybe doesn't know it as well as maybe we think we might know. If we can work in unison as two like-minded countries, imagine the possibilities. And tying back to the beginning of this episode when you talked about the women at the G7, right? There's a lot there that I think we can build on. So I'll leave that there for the moment, but that's what we're thinking about at the moment, right, Jane?
Yeah, exactly. So when we started this podcast more than a year ago, it was a podcast about New Zealand, and we wanted to find out the stories of New Zealanders that were not being told. And now after a year and a half of hearing these stories, we're starting to see what might be the next thing or what else is needed here that we didn't know a year and a half ago. So it's certainly been an education, a fantastic education, and to know more about what New Zealanders are doing and how New Zealand and Japan could work together. I love it. Yeah. Watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. New Zealand, Japan, we're coming for you and here to help.
Yeah, here to help. That's the one. Yeah, so we have so many things that are starting to kind of happen in the next few months. If we think back to some of the episodes we've had recently, especially with Rebecca and Miriana, launches, hotel openings, all of this exciting stuff going on. We're watching all of this and we're learning, and I'm super excited to be part of it. So we hope you are too, as a listener to Jandals in Japan, and that you'll keep following and seeing what we're up to.
Well, this has been lovely and lots of fun, and we hope that you've enjoyed a sort of different way of doing the podcast episode. And we know that you miss our voices, and so you wanted to hear us. So we decided we'd do it now as a sort of a summer thing for you, bring in some of what Alex had told us, tell you a little bit about the JNZBC coming up. We'll give you some more information on that as we get further forward to that event in November.
Yeah, we have a couple more episodes coming before our summer break. So make sure you listen to those. They'll be coming out very soon. And then we'll be taking a month off because absence makes the heart grow fonder,
doesn't
as they say. And we need a break as well, right? Got some things happening in summer, like children not going to school for a month and things.
Absolutely.
Right. We'll see you again soon.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jayne. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!